Well, happy Tuesday and welcome back to The Average Fisherman, everybody. I just walked back into the house from doing a little pond fishing. I'm kind of debating on whether even I'm going to post a video because, you know, it's kind of one of those substandard things. I was catching nothing but tiny little fish, you know, dinks like about that big. And then a game warden finally came up and checked my license and asked me if I was catching anything, and I'm just like, yeah, you know, I caught 6 or 8 little small dinks, you know. I think the biggest one was probably like 3/4 of a pound. And he told me that last winter the pond where I was fishing all but dried up, like pretty much was non-existent. And that this spring, because it was such a wet spring, that it filled back up, and they stocked it with fingerlings like 2 months ago. So that explains a lot. But the problem is, it looks like the pond is drying up again. So, you know, they may have restocked it, but yeah, I don't think any of those fish are going to make it too much longer. But anyway, in the meantime, I had a person ask me some information about topwater frogs, and I told him I would do a video on it because you guys know I love topwater frogs. So first and foremost, I want to get into my frogging rod, what I actually use when I go frogging, and it is this. And I have it on here. I have one tied on here like it always is. This is an Abu Garcia Veritas PLX Tournament Edition rod. It is 7'6" fast heavy. So it's a heavy fast rod. And I have it paired up with this Revo SX Gen 3 in a, let's see, 7.3 to 1. So it's the high speed version. So this is a scum frog. And I like these a lot. Let me get him untangled because I think I just wrapped the line around it. And I like these frogs a lot. It's one of the ones that I tend to use. I'm not sure how this happened. Oh, okay, I see what went on. The line got buried past the thing. So this is one of the bigger models that I use. In fact, it's probably the biggest frog that I use. Now, the question asked was, can you give me some information on topwater frogs? I seem to miss a lot. The truth of the matter is, that's just topwater frogs. I love using them, and I've used them for years. And probably my strike to hookup ratio is somewhere in the 60 to 70%, which is pretty high, actually. I'd say probably most people, it's 40 to 50% hookup to strike just by the nature of the frog. So studies that were done recently show that it's not. Everybody thinks, oh, they're biting the legs of the frogs, you know, and that's not usually what it is. It's just by the nature of the bait and the way the bass is hitting it. They hit it from the side, they hit it from the back, they hit it from the front, and they just don't get the hooks. Or they get the hooks and it's very poorly in their mouth, and when you set the hook, you pull it right out, those kind of things. So, two of the things that I do, and I have a lot of topwater frogs, just FYI, because like I said, I love using them. Let me set these aside and we'll talk about them. So, the two models that I really like a lot, by the way, are the Pad Crashers and Bronze Eye frogs. Okay, here we go. Here's one. It's another brown one, similar size but a little more streamlined. So the thing you'll notice about all my frogs is I don't use popping frogs. None of my frogs are popping frogs. They all have the streamlined front to pull them through weeds and stuff like that. So that ought to tell you a lot about when and where I use them. Now, the time of the day and stuff like that seems to matter a bit. I really haven't done too well on topwater frogs like midday, unless it was very overcast. It tends to be something that's a early morning bite thing for me, usually close up to the shore, and that's when I'll get a lot of them hit. But if I'm getting a lot of strikes, okay, my typical method, there's two schools of thought. There's the school of thought that says, as soon as you see the fish strike, you haul off and swing for the fences. Now, I admit that because of the heavy-duty kind of hooks that are on these kind of frogs, you do have to set the hook a little harder than you would with like a standard Texas rig. But the swinging for the fences thing is it's a fish, all right? You're not trying to pull him out of the water and all the way into the boat in one stroke. It does require a little bit more of a substantial of a hook set, but you don't have to, hook set these fish. I'm of the school of thought that I usually will see the bass hit the bait, and then I wait to feel some kind of tension on the line, and then I will set the hook then. There's a lot of people who say you need to wait to the count of 3. I think that's too long. Okay, just like I think as soon as you see the splash, you nail them, that's too fast. So I usually wait until I feel pressure on the line, then I set the hook. Firmly, but not, not with everything I have. However, what I found even better than that as far as hookups go is downsizing the frog, the overall size of the frog altogether. So as you can see, this is that bronze eye. Here's the frogs that I tend to use the most. Okay, I don't remember the brand name, so I'm not even going to try to remember. I think this is a Pad Crasher. But you can see the size difference. Okay, so I usually start off with these little smaller guys because I have better hookups with these smaller frogs right off the bat. Now, I'm not a trophy fisherman. I'm not trying to win tournaments and stuff like that. I just like to bass fish to bass fish. It's not even something, I don't even keep the fish unless they're gill hooked and stuff like that. This is pure entertainment for me. But admittedly, topwater frog fishing for bass is some hellacious fun. I'm not even going to lie about that. So, let me show you a few frogs that I have here. And some of them look very similar, and there's minor changes between them, like these two. See, one of them has the yellow, and one of them has the legs on it, the little leg decal things on it, and this one doesn't, but it has the yellow beak, I guess is what you would call it. And I've also trimmed the skirt on this one to be somewhat shorter. See that? So in the greens, I have these two little guys, and of course you can see I trimmed the skirt on this one as well. But you'll notice the theme that they're kind of smaller frogs. So I tend to throw these on a spinning reel, okay? Usually 10 or 15 pound braided line, tied straight to the eyelet here. It's not until I start using these bigger frogs that I use my bait caster setup that you just saw. And that's usually if I'm fishing in the swamp. Because swamp bass tend to be pretty big, and there's a lot of garbage you end up having to pull them through when they're hooked. If you catch them back in the marsh or the swamp. So I use that heavy duty setup there with 40 pound braid to haul them out. I've gotten quite a few fish on this frog. This is a bronze eye, I know that much. And it's done fantastic for me. Because the body is super squishy on this one. Some of the other ones, like this one, it's a little firmer. This is a really smooshy body. So when they take a bite out of this thing, watch this. It takes nothing. I mean, there's barely any resistance at all, and there's the hooks popping out, you know what I mean? So the bronze eyes tend to do really well, but if you're getting a lot of missed strikes like everybody gets on frogs, my suggestion honestly would be to downsize. Go to a smaller frog overall, like one of these little guys here, and throw it on a spinning reel with braid, and that usually will help. I've noticed in the past that, like I said earlier, if I'm getting a lot of hits and I just cannot get a hook up on them, even once I feel the downward pressure on the rod, I set the hook and I'm missing the fish. It's not that they're grabbing the legs, and it's not that they're spitting the frogs out. It's usually just a bad bite, meaning, they hit them from the side, and they're getting it in such a way that the hooks can't be pulled into the roof of their mouth. So usually to fix that, you get a smaller frog where they can actually get the whole frog in their mouth, and then when you set the hook, you have a better chance of getting a positive hookup. But these little guys here tend to be pretty soft too. I don't add any weight or anything like that to them. Some guys I've seen doing that, putting small, crimp weights and stuff to give them a little more set in the water. I don't do any of that kind of stuff. I don't bend the hooks up or out or anything like that, because that tends to get more snags. And the whole point of throwing a frog is I throw the frogs in places where I can't throw any other bait, including the power bait pit bosses, without getting hang-ups and stuff like that. So that's when I'm using a frog. It's specifically in places where any other kind of bait is not really viable. So my frogging is typically done in the heaviest of cover, the sloppiest of slop, that kind of stuff. If it's open water, I usually have other options and better options that I tend to fish with. But if it's just really sloppy, lots of hang-ups, lots of snaggy cover, tons of weeds, you know, and stuff like that, then I usually go with the topwater frog. And I've done it to good success. So, bottom line, topwater frogs have a poor hookup ratio inherently just by the nature of the bait. It's just the way things go. Nobody's going to be even approach 100% hookup ratios with topwater frogs. It's just the way it goes. But if you think that you should be getting more fish than you are, downsizing. In fact, like I said, this one's probably the one that I use the most. This little Pad Crasher or the Bronze Eye, one of the two, I don't know. This size is the ones that I throw the most, and I usually throw them on a spinning reel with 15-pound braid tied directly to the eyelet into the heavy stuff. You throw it out, you let it hit the water. This is key. Wait for the ripples to dissipate completely. In other words, it hits the water, ripples go, 10, 15 seconds. I know it sounds like a long time, but it's really not. If there's fish there, especially a sizable bass, you have to be patient. Ripples dissipate, bass comes up and takes a look at it. Usually what you'll find is on the first little twitch, that's when you'll get the hit. Because he's been sitting there eyeballing that frog that whole time. If you just let it sit there, it's like a frog going, shit, what do I do now? And the first time you do the twitch, he'll come up and hammer it. And like I said, I normally wait for the rod tip to go down with some pressure. Heavy hit hook set, not like you're in a Major League Baseball aiming for a home run, but a pretty good hook set. And I've done pretty well doing it that way. So hope that settles it for you guys. Hope it answers your question. Topwater frog fishing, really hard to beat, man. I'm not even going to lie. It is one of my favorite fishing techniques, especially when there's no other viable option to get a bait back in some heavy cover and slop, where anything else that you throw is just going to get full of, weeds or algae or anything like that, or the potential for getting hung up is really high. The topwater frog is the answer. Tight lines, my friends.